There comes a moment when a woman looks at you intently, asks you a seemingly innocent question, and something inside you tenses up. You feel that invisible pressure, that knot in your stomach, that feeling that this is more important than it seems. It's as if you've suddenly been put on a stage with spotlights shining directly on you, and any answer you give will be evaluated with microscopic precision. Most men fall into the trap immediately. They respond nervously, over-explain themselves, try to guess the right answer, or worse yet, get upset and react defensively. They appear confident on the surface, but there's a subtle tone of desperation in their voice. They're seeking approval, and that search becomes their undoing. And it is precisely at that moment that they lose all their power in the relationship. Because when a man responds to a feminine test from a place of insecurity, he unconsciously communicates that he is unsure of his own worth. And no woman can deeply respect a man who doesn't first respect himself. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal to you why women constantly test you, even when you're already in a relationship with them, and exactly what to do about it. You'll understand the hidden mechanics behind every feminine test. You'll discover the 3 precise responses that work in any situation. And you'll master the complete system that transforms these tests into opportunities to deepen your connection. The truth nobody tells you. The tests never stop, they only evolve. If this is already making you think, leave a like and join me on this journey. Think of a filter as a metaphor. Most believe that feminine tests are annoying obstacles, barriers you have to overcome to reach the prize. But a filter doesn't just block, it also purifies. It separates the valuable from the ordinary. And that is exactly the evolutionary purpose of every test she presents to you. To filter out men who only appear to have value from those who genuinely possess it. Let me explain why this happens and why most men fail without realizing it. The fundamental mistake almost everyone makes is interpreting these tests as logical questions that require logical answers. But feminine tests have never been about logic. They're about emotion and instinct. When she asks you, "Do you think that woman is attractive?" or says, "Maybe we should take a break," or questions a decision you made in front of your friends, she's not seeking information. She's evaluating something much deeper. Your emotional solidity, your ability to maintain your center amidst turbulence. The average man responds on a superficial level, addressing the literal content of the question. He rushes to explain, justify, convince. "No, honey, I don't think she's pretty." Or, "Why do you say that? Did I do something wrong?" Or, "Well, I thought it was the best decision because..." Result, he loses credibility in her eyes, even if she can't articulate exactly why. The strategic man understands that the real question behind every test is always the same. Are you really who you say you are? And he responds not with words, but with presence. He maintains his composure, responds from authenticity without seeking to please, and sometimes even mirrors the test with humor. Result, his attractiveness increases every time he's tested. The consequences of failing these tests are much more serious than most imagine. In the short term, it creates that uncomfortable tension, that almost imperceptible moment of disappointment in her gaze. In the medium term, it establishes a pattern where she unconsciously loses respect and, therefore, attraction. In the long term, it completely destroys the masculine-feminine polarity in the relationship. She can no longer relax into her feminine energy because she feels she must take control. Passion dies, and the relationship becomes a functional friendship at best. But why does this happen? The psychology behind these tests is fascinating and has deep roots in our evolutionary biology. Women developed this testing mechanism because historically, the cost of choosing poorly was astronomically higher for them than for men. A pregnancy meant 9 months of vulnerability and years of care, a time during which they depended on male protection and provision. The woman who could identify weaknesses in a suitor's facade had a massive evolutionary advantage. It's like a biological security system that persists to this day, even in modern, independent women who don't seek to have children. It's not conscious, it's not malicious, it's instinctive, and it responds to a fundamental need for emotional security that transcends modern logic. Think of a natural lie detector. When a polygraph detects a lie, it's not because it understands the content of what you say, but because it measures micro-fluctuations in your physiological response that betray internal incongruence. In the same way, she's not analyzing your words, but your micro-expressions, tone of voice, body tension, and the speed with which you respond. everything that reveals your true level of inner security. The average man tries to memorize correct answers to specific questions, but fails because his nonverbal language betrays his inner insecurity. The aligned man doesn't need to memorize anything because he responds from a place of unshakable authenticity. He doesn't fear her reaction because he doesn't depend on her approval to validate his worth. Perhaps you've noticed that just when things are going perfectly well, she does something to ruin the moment. She criticizes you for something insignificant or questions a simple decision. Or perhaps you've experienced how, after an important achievement, instead of pure celebration, you face a strangely distant attitude or a deflating comment. Or that time with friends when she brought up that embarrassing story just when everyone was admiring you. Or when, after you've been super attentive and accommodating for days instead of a deeper connection, you felt her inexplicably pull away. Or even today, when everything seemed perfect, she suddenly questioned your commitment to the relationship, seemingly out of nowhere. It's like being in a job interview that never ends, where the rules constantly change without warning. Most men feel they're walking on eggshells, constantly fearing saying or doing the wrong thing. But that very anxiety guarantees failure, creating a vicious cycle where the more you try to avoid the tests, the more intense they become. The man who tries to avoid tests is like someone trying to avoid the rain by refusing to look at the sky. It doesn't change reality, it only guarantees you'll arrive at your destination soaked. But there's a hidden cost that goes beyond the external relationship. Every time you modify your behavior to avoid a negative reaction, every time you suppress your truth to keep the peace, every time you swallow your words for fear of her judgment, you are betraying yourself, and that internal betrayal accumulates like an invisible debt, paying interest in the form of resentment, frustration, and eventually, total apathy towards the relationship. The most ironic thing is that by trying to preserve the relationship by avoiding conflict, you're destroying it from the inside, depriving it of the fundamental ingredient that would keep it alive, your authentic and unapologetic masculine presence. But identifying the problem is only the beginning. Now I'll show you exactly what to do, step by step, for the 3 most common tests you'll face this week. The main technique you need to master is what I call impermeable presence. It consists of maintaining your emotional center intact, regardless of the test's intensity. It's not about faking indifference, but genuinely inhabiting a state where your worth is not up for negotiation. First, you recognize the test without verbally labeling it. You notice the sudden shift in energy, the loaded question, the statement designed to provoke. This creates a microspace between the stimulus and your response. You observe your internal reaction without identifying with it. Then, instead of counterattacking or defending yourself, you maintain steady eye contact and a slight smile that communicates, "I see what you're doing, and it's adorable." Finally, you respond from your truth, without filtering it to gain approval. Most react from fear with nervous or defensive energy. You respond from security with centered and slightly amused energy. The difference isn't subtle, it's fundamental. When a man responds from his truth without seeking validation, he activates something primal in the feminine instinct. Imagine you're at a dinner with friends. She casually mentions a flaw of yours, or tells a story that exposes you, glancing at you out of the corner of her eye to gauge your reaction. The tension is palpable. Everyone waits to see how you handle the situation. The average man visibly tenses up. His smile becomes forced. He laughs nervously or tries to explain why the story isn't as bad as it sounds. Perhaps he even hits back by mentioning something embarrassing about her. The atmosphere becomes uncomfortable. The connection between the two of you decreases, not increases. But you lean back slightly in your chair, maintaining a relaxed but upright posture. You smile genuinely, enjoying the moment as if it were a movie you're watching. When the laughter subsides, you simply say, "It's true, and there are plenty more stories where that came from, aren't there, love?" You maintain playful eye contact with her, completely comfortable in your own skin. The atmosphere changes instantly. She, who expected to make you uncomfortable, is now intrigued. Your response communicates security on a level that words never could, because he who isn't afraid of being exposed has nothing to hide, and he who has nothing to hide possesses extraordinary power. He who fears judgment shrinks. He who accepts his imperfection expands. Now take this same principle into an intimate interaction. You're alone, things are going well, and suddenly she says, "What are we really? Are we wasting our time?" Or, "I don't know if this will work long term." The insecure man panics. He rushes to convince her why they should be together, lists reasons, makes promises, or worse yet, anxiously asks, "Why do you say that? Don't you feel the same anymore?" His energy communicates, "Please don't leave me. I don't know if I can find anyone better." You, on the other hand, maintain a serene calm. You don't react as if you're about to lose something invaluable. You look at her directly, take a moment to truly consider what she said, and respond with calm honesty. "That's a good question. I'm enjoying what we're building day by day. If at any point you feel this isn't for you, I'll understand. I want you to be with me by choice, not by obligation." Your response disarms her because she expected anxiety, pleading, or anger. Instead, she finds a man who values the relationship but isn't desperate to keep it at all costs. Paradoxically, this genuine freedom you offer her creates a space where she can choose to stay, instead of feeling trapped by your need. The strongest relationship isn't one where you fear losing, but where both choose to stay. In the digital context, tests take on more subtle but equally powerful forms. She stops responding for hours when she used to reply in minutes. She posts photos having fun without you. She likes other men's comments. Or she simply responds with short, seemingly disinterested messages. The reactive man bombards with messages, demands explanations, or plays the same game to provoke jealousy. All his behavior screams insecurity, even if his words say otherwise. You maintain your natural rhythm. You don't speed up your replies out of anxiety or artificially delay them out of pride. If she doesn't respond, you carry on with your life. When she finally replies, you respond normally, without passive-aggressive reproaches or interrogations about her absence. Your behavior subtly communicates, "My inner peace doesn't depend on the frequency of your messages." This internal consistency creates a fascinating phenomenon. She begins to adjust her behavior to yours, not the other way around. She seeks your attention more because she intuitively knows you won't pursue her from a place of neediness. He who controls his digital reaction controls the emotional dynamic. But pay close attention. There are 3 dangerous mistakes when applying this mindset. The first mistake is confusing presence with coldness or indifference. Many men, in trying to project security, become emotionally distant or apathetic. This destroys the connection instead of strengthening it. The correction lies in maintaining genuine emotional warmth while remaining centered. The second mistake is applying these techniques as an external performance without internal work. Many memorize phrases and postures, but they collapse under more intense tests because they haven't cultivated true inner confidence. To avoid this, use each test as an opportunity for self-awareness, asking yourself, what insecurity within me is being activated right now? The third mistake, the most subtle and dangerous of all, using these tools from a place of resentment towards women. This approach stems from a wounded ego and guarantees dysfunctional relationships. If you perceive bitterness in your thoughts, immediately recalibrate your perspective and remember that these tests are a natural phenomenon, not a feminine conspiracy. This works perfectly on a practical level, but there's a deeper level that separates those who merely survive tests from those who truly master them and transform them into opportunities for deeper connection. The counterintuitive truth that changes everything. Feminine tests are not obstacles, they are invitations. Everything you've been taught about this topic is fundamentally wrong. Conventional wisdom says you must pass these tests to be accepted, but that perspective perpetuates a power dynamic where you're always seeking approval, just in a more sophisticated way. What men don't understand is that these tests are actually the primary language through which a woman constantly evaluates not only your worth, but the safety she feels with you. And here's the complete paradox. The more you try to pass her tests, the more you'll fail, because the attempt itself reveals that you're still seeking external validation. The truth is diametrically opposite. The evolutionary purpose of these tests is to find the man who doesn't need to pass them because he's not seeking approval in the first place. And this changes everything because it transforms every interaction from an exam you must overcome to an opportunity to deepen your own authenticity. When you understand this, the entire dynamic reverses. Going back to our filter metaphor, you're not trying to pass through the filter, you are the filter. Let me tell you the story of a client of mine, Miguel. He had been in a relationship for 3 years that had slowly transformed from passionate to routine. The sexual tension had almost completely disappeared, replaced by constant arguments where she criticized him for insignificant things. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Miguel had tried everything. being more attentive, buying her gifts, giving in during arguments, even couples therapy. Nothing worked. The situation worsened until she finally suggested taking a break. When we started working together, I explained this concept of tests as invitations to him. At first, it was difficult for him to accept that his partner's constant criticisms weren't really about the superficial issues, that he wasn't helpful enough, wasn't romantic enough, wasn't a good listener, but rather tests of his internal solidity. Slowly, Miguel began to respond differently. Instead of defending himself or promising to change, he started to maintain his center. When she criticized, he listened completely, took what was valid, and maintained his position on what he considered unfair without entering into conflict. What was fascinating was what happened next. After a few weeks of intensified tension, what I call the final test before the shift, the dynamic completely transformed. She started to seek him out physically again. The criticisms decreased, and one day she confessed something revealing. "I don't know what's changed in you, but I feel safe again." This story repeats constantly, not because it's a manipulative technique, but because it responds to a fundamental truth. Every woman yearns to feel that she is with a man who will not crumble under pressure. Have you noticed how some couples keep the spark alive after decades while others lose it in months? The difference is rarely in external circumstances. It's in the man's ability to remain a mystery to solve. A man who, though deeply known, is never fully predictable because he doesn't seek to please at the cost of his authenticity. Look around you. Men who maintain passionate long-term relationships are not necessarily the most handsome, wealthy, or even charismatic. They are those whose partners continue to test them and discover again and again that they remain solid as oaks. This creates a positive cycle where each test overcome increases attraction, which naturally decreases the frequency of destructive tests. Think about that time you stood your ground on something important despite her disapproval. Do you remember what happened next? Probably not a devastating fight, but renewed respect, and perhaps even an intense physical reconnection. Why? Because you showed that your internal compass works independently of her validation, and paradoxically, this is exactly what she needs to experience to feel safe with you. When a man stands firm in his truth without being aggressive or giving in, he activates the feminine in her. The clearest sign that you've internalized this mindset is when you start to see her tests with a slight internal smile, recognizing them as opportunities, not threats. You don't react. You simply observe the pattern with compassionate curiosity. People around you notice that criticisms or questioning no longer affect you as they did before. Situations that used to destabilize you now seem almost amusing in their predictability. And most importantly, the nature of your relationships fundamentally changes, moving from constant effort to a natural flow where your solid presence attracts instead of chases. A master of this art doesn't just pass tests. He enjoys them. He sees each test as a gift that allows him to deepen his own congruence. He doesn't react to them. He receives them with playful curiosity, knowing that each one is an opportunity to demonstrate, primarily to himself, the solidity of his inner core. Tests are not obstacles in your path. They are the path itself. Now that you understand this, it's time to transform this understanding into a practical system. I'll give you 3 precise tools you can implement immediately, regardless of the state of your current relationship. The first tool is called the calibrated mirror. This technique allows you to reflect the energy of her test, but with a specific calibration that transforms the dynamic. You use it when she directly challenges you, unfairly criticizes you, or tries to provoke a negative emotional reaction. Here's how it works in detail. When she launches a verbal test, first breathe deeply, creating a mental space. Then, instead of defending yourself or counterattacking, you reflect the emotional content of her message, slightly elevating it toward the absurd but maintaining a playful tone. Finally, you redirect the conversation toward something constructive. For example, when she says, "Sometimes I think you don't really care about me," instead of rushing to prove her wrong, you calmly respond, "You're right. I actually have a secret girlfriend in every city and you're just part of my master plan." You say it with a genuine smile that communicates, "We both know that's ridiculous." The effect is immediate. The tension dissolves, and her nervous system registers that you couldn't be destabilized. The second tool is the serene boundary. This is for when tests cross a threshold of basic respect or become manipulative. The key here isn't the content of your boundary, but the energy with which you deliver it. When she crosses an important line, You maintain calm but firm eye contact. Without raising your voice or showing excessive emotionality, you clearly state, "I understand you're upset. I'm here to resolve this with you. But I'm not going to continue this conversation with that tone. Let's take a moment and revisit this when we can discuss it constructively." Then, and this is crucial, you maintain that boundary with absolute consistency, regardless of the initial reaction. The way a man sets a boundary reveals more about his worth than any external achievement. The third tool is the amplified presence. This is perhaps the most powerful but requires consistent practice. It's about deliberately intensifying your masculine presence when you feel she's initiating a test. Instead of energetically shrinking from her challenge, you subtly but perceptibly expand your physical presence. You maintain an upright posture, deep breathing, deliberately slow movements, and a resonant voice from your diaphragm. You don't interrupt. You don't rush your responses. You fully occupy your physical and emotional space. This amplified presence communicates non-verbally. "I am completely comfortable in the midst of this storm," and it triggers an almost automatic response in her nervous system, the relaxation of her feminine energy. He who masters his presence needs to master no one else. Now I'm going to give you a surgical plan for the next 7 days. It's not theory, it's an action protocol. For the first 2 days, your sole focus is to implement the calibrated mirror. Don't try to do everything at once, just this technique. Every time you feel that characteristic tension that precedes or accompanies a feminine test, and it will happen at least 3 times in these 2 days, apply the technique exactly as I explained it to you. No matter the context, dating relationship, getting to know you phase, even interactions with women in your social circle. What you'll notice? Initial discomfort when implementing something new on day 1, a sense of greater ease on day 2. You'll feel artificial at first, which is normal and necessary in any new learning. But after applying it 4 or 5 times, it will start to feel natural. You'll observe micro-expressions of positive surprise in her. Pay special attention to how the energy shifts after your response. That moment of disorientation followed by relaxation is the sign that you're on the right track. On days 3 and 4, you continue with the calibrated mirror and add the serene boundary when necessary. Now you have 2 active tools. When a test arises, not only do you reflect with calibration, but you are prepared to set a boundary if the situation requires it. The combination creates a synergistic effect where she experiences both your lightness and your firmness. Here the game visibly changes because you begin to operate from a place of conscious choice instead of programmed reaction. You'll notice that you feel less anxious about potential confrontations. You'll observe that she starts to respect your words and time more. And most importantly, you'll perceive a subtle but significant shift in the power dynamic. If you experience unusual resistance, it's a sign that you're breaking established patterns, which is positive though uncomfortable. Adjust your tone if you feel you're being too rigid or too accommodating. Days 5, 6, and 7 are for refining and integrating the amplified presence. Now you operate with the complete system: direct verbal test, calibrated mirror, disrespect or manipulation, serene boundary, energetic tension or nonverbal test, amplified presence. Specifically observe how the quality of communication changes, not just the words, but the energy between you. Notice how situations that previously escalated into conflicts now resolve with greater ease. Adjust the intensity of your presence based on the response you receive. If you perceive persistent resistance, it means you might be applying the techniques mechanically without the proper internal mindset, and you need to reconnect with the fundamental why behind these practices. At this point, you will experience a tangible shift in how you feel within your relationships. It's not imagination or suggestion. It's the measurable result of moving from reactivity to conscious response. And this is just the beginning. But pay utmost attention now, because there are 3 critical mistakes that can destroy everything you've built, even when correctly applying the techniques. Error number 1, intermittent consistency. It seems like a technical problem, but in reality, it's a fundamental sabotage. It occurs when you apply these tools selectively, with strength when you feel good, but you collapse under tests when you're tired or vulnerable. The unmistakable sign: they work perfectly for a while, then mysteriously lose effectiveness. Immediate consequence: confusion in her nervous system about who you really are. Long-term consequence: intensification of tests to determine your true nature. The precise correction is to apply these principles as a daily practice, not as occasional techniques, even, especially, when you don't feel energetic. The second error is reactive overcompensation. Many men, upon discovering the power of not reacting defensively, go to the opposite extreme, becoming artificially stoic or indifferent. This occurs primarily when there are unhealed past emotional wounds. The indicator is when you find yourself enjoying her frustration or using these tools to get back at her for past experiences. Result: you create emotional distance where you wanted deep connection. The specific solution is to cultivate genuine empathy alongside your inner strength, remembering that the goal is never to win against her, but to create a space where both of you can be authentic. The third error, the most subtle and dangerous of all, turning technical mastery into a substitute for authentic personal growth. It manifests when you become skilled at handling external tests while ignoring the internal insecurities they activate. It seems to work because externally the relationship improves, but internally you're building an increasingly elaborate facade. If you find yourself frequently thinking about strategies and techniques instead of being fully present, you've fallen into this trap. The only real solution is to use each test as a mirror for your own development, asking yourself, what does this show me about what I still need to heal within myself? Perfect techniques without personal growth are just a sophisticated mask. And before I finish, there's something fundamental I need to tell you about all of this. Something that differentiates those who truly transform their relationships from those who merely accumulate techniques. So let's do a final recap, but not as a sterile summary. I'll give you the 4 pillars that now define how you operate in your relationships. First pillar: feminine tests are constant, inevitable, and necessary, not out of malice, but from an evolutionary instinct for emotional protection, and every time you avoid them or react defensively, you communicate fundamental weakness. Second pillar: impermeable presence is your strategic response, maintaining authenticity without seeking approval, responding from your truth without filtering it to please, and transforming each test into an opportunity to deepen your internal congruence. Third pillar: these tests are not obstacles but invitations to demonstrate your solidity, not to her, but to yourself. And paradoxically, the less you try to pass them, the more naturally you'll overcome them from a place of unshakable authenticity. Fourth pillar: the integrated system of the calibrated mirror, serene boundary, and amplified presence allows you to strategically respond to any test, transforming dysfunctional power dynamics into a healthy polarity that reignites attraction and deepens connection. These 4 pillars are not abstract theory. They are your new relational architecture. And now you have the complete map. True strength doesn't repel tests, it transforms them. Now comes your challenge, and it starts exactly in the next 24 hours. Not tomorrow, not next week, in the next 24 hours. During this period, you will face at least one significant test. It could come as an unexpected criticism, a questioning of your commitment, or even a strategic silence. But it will come, and you'll instantly recognize it by that unmistakable feeling of internal tension that arises when you perceive you're being evaluated. When it happens, I want you to specifically apply the calibrated mirror, not a diluted or theoretical version, the full, precise version I've shown you. You don't need to announce that you're trying something new. You don't need to explain the concept to her. The beauty lies in the silent implementation. Simply create that 1-second internal space, respond with calibrated lightness, and observe carefully what happens next. Because when you do, 3 things will occur. First, you'll notice an immediate shift in her facial expression, moving from tension to curiosity. Second, you'll feel an internal freedom that arises when you respond from authenticity instead of defensiveness. And third, you'll observe how an interaction that could have escalated into conflict transforms into an opportunity for deeper connection. This is your trial by fire. Your chance to prove not to her, not to me, but to yourself, that this isn't theory. It's a practical reality that transforms relationships. And after applying it, come back and share specifically how the energy shifted between you. I want to know not what you said, but how you felt as you maintained your center during the test. And now the password. Comment exactly this, word for word. Unbreakable inside, flexible outside. This isn't just a comment. It's a declaration of intent. It shows that you haven't just consumed 30 minutes of content, but you've absorbed the essence of what it truly means to be a centered man in relationships. That you're not part of the majority who seek quick techniques, but one of the centered. Men who understand that true relational mastery begins with inner mastery. This is our password, our shared code. I will read every comment personally, and I will know exactly who has understood the depth of the message and who has simply skimmed over it. And since you've made it to the end, there's something I deliberately didn't mention today. In the next video, I'll reveal the hidden pattern behind cyclical tests, those that seem to resolve but repeatedly return in different forms. It has to do with the cycle of proximity and distance that determines the emotional temperature of every long-term relationship, and it explains why many men pass individual tests but fail to maintain sustained attraction. But we'll cover that in depth next time. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. The next video comes out in exactly 7 days. Remember the filter metaphor I mentioned at the beginning? Now you understand its true meaning. It's not simply about passing through the filter she presents to you. It's about becoming the most refined filter yourself, a man who discerns what deserves his emotional response and what doesn't, what deserves his energy and what should be let go. When you become that living filter, operating from discernment instead of reaction, the relational world transforms before your eyes. You're no longer the one trying to pass tests. You're the one who creates them by your mere presence. The final test isn't what she presents to you, but what you demand of yourself. Now go and become the man you've always been beneath your reactions.